Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Today I'm in this 2015 Audi A8. Famously the car of choice for Jason Statham in all those transporter films. The Audi A8 is a large and luxurious four-door saloon car that's been around since the mid-90s. I've had a few of those early ones, a 2.8 V6 and a 3.7 V8, and they were alright, but they weren't as good as the rest. You see, the A8 was created to rival the Mercedes S-Class, the Jaguar XJ, BMW 7 Series. In the case of the Mark 1 A8, I just didn't think it was as good as the rivals. The E38 7 Series was prettier, as was the Jag XJ. The Mercedes S-Class was better built, and the LS was more reliable. In my mind, the Mark 1 just didn't have any redeeming features. Thankfully, the Mark 2 was much better. That second generation ran from 2002 until 2008, and it was much better. It was slightly longer than its predecessor, so it offered much more interior space, and the engine choice was better. It was just a better finished car, and better looking too. The model I'm in today is a Mark III, which ran from 2009 until 2017, and it has a lot going for it. Thanks to its lightweight aluminium frame and body panels, this is the lightest all-wheel drive car in its class, which makes it the most economical. It uses Audi's famous Quattro four-wheel drive system, which sends 60% of the power to the back and 40% to the front. The gearbox is a traditional 8-speed ZF Auto with a torque converter, so it doesn't have one of those annoying CVT boxes, or one of those silly temperamental dual clutch boxes. I've used this car for the last couple of days and it's superb. I've really got used to using it. So much so, I've actually considered selling my Range Rover and keeping this. If you compare this to a Range Rover, it's cheaper to tax, more economical, and it still has that diplomatic, ministerial look. The tech, the comfort, the refinement this A8 offers, it's all top drawer. Using this car has made me realise that the Audi A8 is often unfairly overlooked. I think lots of people, when they're looking for a large executive car, automatically go for a 7 Series or S-Class or Jag XJ. They must genuinely forget that the A8 exists. Styling wise, it's quite understated and a bit plain. It just looks like a large A4. It's certainly not as memorable or as pretty as a Jaguar XJ. It's not as flashy and imposing as a Mercedes S-Class, but on the bright side it's not as ugly as a BMW 7 Series. I do think the styling of this car might be the A8's biggest selling point, because you can completely fly under the radar with this thing. It allows you to drive something that's big and expensive, and yet it won't turn a single head. It isn't vulgar or crass. It's totally inconspicuous. Inside the A8, it's all very upmarket. It's very luxurious. It just oozes class. Everything is electrically adjustable, as you might expect, and the materials used are excellent. I know you'll recognise some of the buttons and switches from the cheaper A4, A3 and even A1, but I mean, what manufacturer doesn't do that these days? But at least with the A8, they have done well to try and disguise some of those buttons. Everything you touch feels solid and well built. The next thing I'm about to say, I often say, and it's a bit of a cliche to be honest, but you could drive this thing all day long and not feel tired. It's supremely comfortable and the leather's really nice and soft. This one has the Valcona comfort seats, and they just feel really warm and soft. Although to be fair, I can't imagine the standard seats in an A8 being bad. It's a £70,000 car, they're not going to feel like the seats from a stagecoach. All of the switches and controls are within easy reach for the driver. I like the fact that you've got the volume control down here and not up here. That's very common on Audis, but it just seems like such a common sense thing to do. And I'm surprised other manufacturers don't copy them. The infotainment system's quite easy to use and operate. The heater controls are a little bit fiddly, but everything else is pretty good, pretty easy to use. The centre screen can disappear at the touch of a button, and also you can power up the rear blind for just a little bit more privacy. The quality of the display of the infotainment system is also very good, as is the quality of the reverse camera. The gauges and dials are all laid out very nice, and it tells you every single bit of information that you could possibly wish to know. You can even see the sat-nav on there. The next feature is quite common these days on cars, but it's got a digital TV. And although you can't use it while you're driving, it will still play the audio from whichever channel you're watching. Perfect if you're a businessman on the move and you want to watch Bloomberg or CNN or one of those channels. Be ideal if your last name's Pafitis or Bannatyne or Sugar. You'd expect any car of this nature to be refined and quiet, wouldn't you? Well, the Audi A8 takes it to another level. You've got double glazing, and you've got reams of soundproofing, so you really can't hear a thing. It's very easy to forget as you drive this that under the bonnet is a noisy diesel engine. Even at motorway speeds, this car could fool you into thinking that you're in a deserted library. It's so quiet. Now, I love a car like this because after a stressful day at work, you can just switch your phone off, get behind the wheel, and just unwind. It's the automotive equivalent of having a relaxing bath. It's not all good though, there are a few things that I don't like. Let's start off with this gear selector. It's a really nice place to rest your hand as you're driving along, but I think it's been designed by either Trini or Susanna. It certainly wasn't designed by anyone with an engineering background. It sort of works like a joystick, so it always centres itself. So you push it down for drive, or forward for neutral, reverse or park. But if you're doing a 3-point turn on a busy road, and you quickly want to select drive and then reverse, you often find that you've accidentally selected park. So as you try and creep backwards in reverse, you actually just rev up and don't move. Quite embarrassing. There should have been perhaps a separate button on the side or the top for park, like a shark fin lever off a BMW. What else can I tell you that I don't like about it? I think that might be it, you know. As I said, I've been enjoying it. This won't come as any surprise when I tell you this, but the A8 is an extremely comfortable car. It rides really well. I mean, this is the A8L, so it's the long wheelbase version. So it's actually 13 centimetres longer than the standard A8. That makes this A8L over 5 metres long, which means there's plenty of flex to absorb any unwanted bumps. In addition to that, it also has air suspension, so you really can't feel anything. I'm not sure I'd buy the long wheelbase version personally. I think it's too long. I don't like long wheelbase versions of anything. I think they just look a little bit too ungainly. The rear doors are huge, and coming out of a side junction takes about an hour. Trying to drive one of these through a quaint Derbyshire village is a bit like trying to thread a sewing needle with a rope. Needless to say though, if I were to be chauffeured around in something, then I would definitely pick the L. There's so much room back there. Because this car's over 5 metres long, there's plenty of interior space. There's loads of room up front, loads of headroom, plenty of elbow room, and there's plenty of space in the back. Boot space is pretty good at 510 litres. It isn't as spacious as an Audi A6 Avant, but then you're not going to want to turn up to a meeting in an A6 Avant. You'd rather turn up in an Audi A8. You don't see Angela Merkel turning up at the G7 in an A6 Avant. Something that's often overlooked with luxury cars is the amount of storage cubbies, and the A8 has lots of them. There's plenty of storage for pens, cups, you name it. There really isn't any dead space, it's all been utilised. They offered the A8 with loads of different engine choices, so I'll give you a quick brief rundown. There was the 3-litre petrol, TFSI, which is quite rare, mainly due to its unpopularity. There's the 4-litre V8 TFSI, and if you want something even more powerful still, that runs on petrol, there's a W12. Then they do a hybrid version, which is quite rare, but the most popular ones, or at least here in Europe, are the 2 diesels. They do a 3-litre turbo diesel V6, or a 4.2-litre turbo diesel V8. Both are brilliant. I've driven both. The model I'm in today is a 3-litre turbo diesel V6, which produces about 260 horsepower. And to be honest, it's all the engine you'd ever need. Perfectly quick, perfectly frugal, but really does have some torque. It sounds pretty good too for a diesel. It doesn't sound like a clattery old oil burner. This will do 0 to 60 in 6 seconds, and it will keep going until it gets to 155. I mean, how much quicker do you need to go? And on top of that, it's really economical as well. Road tax here on this model is only £210 a year. It's also ULEZ friendly, which means you could drive it straight up to Big Ben and not be treated like a convicted sex offender. If you drive it fairly sensibly, there is no reason at all why you shouldn't see 44, 45 miles per gallon. It's really impressive. It has an 82-litre fuel tank, which means if you brim it full of V-power diesel, it will set you back 3 figures. But you should get 750 miles from a full tank. If you've had an Audi before, you'll be familiar with its drive select system. It means that at the touch of a button, you can make it more comfortable, more efficient, or more sporty. Put it in dynamic mode and straight away the throttle response is better. And also it makes the suspension a little bit firmer. It isn't fun to drive in the same way that, I don't know, perhaps a BMW 5 Series is fun to drive. But it certainly isn't dull either. To be frank with you, you're better off just keeping it in automatic and letting the car do its thing. I'll try comfort, give that a whirl. Even in comfort mode, it doesn't feel like a wafty barge like my old LS430 does. It still feels quite hunkered down. Of course, you've got the added bonus of knowing that you've got Audi's Quattro 4-wheel drive system, should things get a little bit slippery. There are 3 different trim levels. There's the SE, there's the SC Executive, and then there's the Sport Executive. Now, this model is the SC Executive, and that, to be honest, is the one I would go for. The Sport Executive does, well, pretty much everything that you'd expect. It's a little bit more sporty, but if you're after a sporty A8, I think you're better off going for an A6 or an A7. The A8 should all be about comfort and refinement. Audi facelifted the A8 in 2013, and if your budget will stretch, I would recommend going for a facelift model. They just look a little bit better from the outside. Inside you get nicer, newer tech. Certainly if you're keeping it for the long haul, you'd be better off going for a facelift version. One good feature of the A8 that you should really look out for is the matrix beam LED headlamps. They're brilliant. They're certainly the best headlamps of any car I've ever driven. At night they're unbelievably good. They bend around corners. Wouldn't want to have to replace one though. Can't imagine they're cheap. All these big executive cars, especially the long wheelbase variants, were designed to be driven by some lackey while the owner relaxes in the back. And the back is really where you want to be. From the back you can control the audio, the TV station, the rear blinds, the climate. You might end up feeling a little bit like Simon Cowell though. Usually when you're thinking about buying a luxury car like this, some naysayer who drives a Ford Focus will say something like, well, if you can't afford to buy a new luxury car, you certainly can't afford to buy a used one. Well, that is absolute rubbish, because the A8 is no more expensive to run than an A6 or an A4. Apart from the cost of tyres, which will be 50 or 60 quid a corner more than an A4 or an A6, everything else is pretty much on par. You could even go to an Audi main dealer for servicing, because they do fixed price servicing on older cars. I've used Audi Hyde many times, and the service is always very good and quite reasonable. But in reality, there's nothing on this car that would frighten even your most pessimistic local mechanic. There are currently no recalls that I can warn you about. There's really nothing on this car that would put me off buying one. Audi have used this engine in loads of things over the years. I've had lots of them, and apart from a Q7 once a couple of years ago that cost me a couple of injectors at £250 each, there's nothing else that I could tell you about it that's remotely negative. Of course, it's a diesel, so you might have a turbo issue or an EGR issue or a DPF issue, but that's just par for the course. Used prices here in the UK start at around £10,000, but that's going to get you an early high mileage example. But to be honest with you, I wouldn't be put off by high mileage examples. Most of them have been chauffeur cars and driven only on motorways. So if it's got 120, 140,000 miles, again, that really wouldn't put me off. For a facelift model with low mileage, expect to spend anywhere between £15,000 and £20,000. I just think that's such great value for money. It can't be overlooked. You know, a couple of months ago, I don't know if you remember this, I filmed with a white Audi A4, and that was about 18 months younger than this, and it had done 15,000 fewer miles. And it was the same sort of figure as this. And I know which one I'd rather drive. For some reason here in the UK, large executive luxurious limousines like this are often far cheaper than the smaller cars. It just doesn't make any sense, but it's great news for you or I. Having spent more and more time with this car now, I can honestly say, if I wasn't such a Range Rover fanboy, I think I'd have an A8. So on that note, thank you once again for watching. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'll leave the link below. If you've got any comments or questions, let me know, and I'll do my best to get back to you. If you're interested in getting into the used car business, do check out my online course. I've made an online portal with nearly 100 videos which explain every single aspect of the motor trade. How to start, funding options, where to buy cars, what to look for, how to sell cars, how to photograph them. Everything you could possibly wish to know is on that course. So do check it out. So yeah, anyway, cheers guys. I'll see you next time.